everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, my name is Sophie and I would love it if you click that big red subscribe button down below and turn on that notification bell as well so that you never miss a video. Now this video is going to be all about learning languages when you're either working full-time or just have a really busy schedule, because that is something that I have really been interested into the last like 8 months or so, 7 months I think actually, to be correct. And you know, I am by far no means an expert, and this is something that I'm still working on, and I definitely spend less time learning languages than I did when I was studying languages full-time at university, which, you know, is natural, will be the case that if you have a busy schedule you can only dedicate X amount of hours to language learning, and some days maybe you won't even end up dedicating those hours because you'll just be too tired and won't be able to take any of it in. But I have been trying to find ways to be more motivated to continue learning languages whilst commuting into London 3 days a week and still working from home the others. And this is just my advice and hopefully it helps you. So firstly, let's talk about grammar, because I feel like it's so important to learn grammar when studying a language. I know there's some polyglots out there that say you shouldn't learn grammar. And I'm not saying grammar is, you know, should be your main focus necessarily, but I do think it's important to spend some time studying grammar. But I know a lot of people dislike grammar, and that's why I would say, unless you are an absolute grammar nerd and you really love grammar and you come home from work and you think, oh, I can't wait to, you know, study some French grammar, save the grammar for your days off, just because if you... From my personal experience, if I said, right, when I get home from work, I'm going to just do literally just 1 page of my grammar book for a certain language, I'll come home and I won't do it, or if I do it, I'll end up looking at my phone, or I'll end up feeling like falling asleep, or I'll just rush through the questions and then I'll be like, I can't be bothered to actually check the answers. Just doesn't work. And, you know, maybe in the summer it'll work a bit better, because in the UK we have a lot of evenings in the summer, and long days in the summer and long nights in the winter, and it's very hard when it's already dark before you get home from work to then be motivated to sit down at a desk and do some grammar work. But yeah, I would say save the grammar for your days off, which I know can be hard, because obviously sometimes on your days off you might not have any time to dedicate at all to grammar, because you might be going out for day trips and meeting friends and, you know, doing things, having a social life or doing other hobbies. Language learning might not be your only hobby. However, if you do have like an hour spare on one of your days off, I honestly think this is the best time to study grammar, because I think you'll just be more motivated to learn grammar. I don't know, for me, I feel like I have to do grammar early in the day whilst it's light outside, and then I can still like have the rest of the day to enjoy. I can go out in the afternoon or whatever. That's just what I found works best for me, but we're all different. And my next tip is learn little and often, which I feel like is something people talk about a lot in regards to learning languages anyway, because I do think it's good to just keep languages fresh in your mind, even if that means just spending half an hour doing something a day, or even 5 minutes doing something a day. That's better than nothing. And I think that is really true when you work full-time, because you're not going to necessarily have the time to spend an hour revising grammar, then half an hour revising vocab, in whether that be flashcards or however you like to revise grammar, and then half an hour to watch something in that language and do some listening practice. You're not going to have all that time, and some days you might also just be really like unmotivated. And for me, I found like I'd never been a big fan of Duolingo before I started working full time, because sometimes I just did not have the energy to do anything, and at least I could do like 5 minutes of Duolingo. I'm not saying that is the best and that is the best way to learn, but I'm saying it's better than nothing, right? You're still revising in some way. I know we shouldn't solely rely on apps like Duolingo to learn languages, but I'm saying if there's one day where you've really run out of time but you still want to do something, picking up an app of some sort, whichever language learning app you prefer and you feel works best for you, and just doing 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is better than doing absolutely nothing. And even with Duolingo, I know people don't necessarily like it, but you know, you are revising simple sentence structures, and you are kind of also revising grammar without really going over it in too much detail, but you know, you are completing sentences and thinking about the grammar in your head. So yeah, I do think that's really good, and that's something you can do if you commute to work as well, on the train. I should really be learning languages on my commute, but I just so unmotivated to learn on the train. It's so bad. I'm always just tired. I'm always tired when I'm commuting, okay? This next one's probably an obvious one, but I can't not include it, and that is to obviously watch shows in your target language. Now, this is one I recommend regardless of whether you have loads of time to dedicate to language learning or not, because it's a great way to really immerse yourself in the language. And I think a language immersion is so key and so important, and something that can just make your language improve and make your language also just sound a bit more natural, because you'll pick up on the way certain things are said the more and more you hear that language. So this is something I really recommend, but also, like I mentioned earlier on, sometimes I'd come back from work, right, and I'll be so tired, it'll be dark outside, and all I'd want to do is get in my pyjamas and watch Netflix. I can't watch something in Netflix or on Disney Plus or whatever in the language I'm learning, and then I'm still immersing myself in that language, and I'm still learning in some way. It might not be sitting down with a grammar book or a course book or whatever. It is still something, and it's something that's actually going to have a big impact on your listening comprehension and understanding how things are pronounced, and also you'll just learn new vocabulary. Because I don't know about you, but I find I learn vocabulary better if I hear that vocabulary used in actual sentences, and I can use it myself in actual sentences. So the more I am watching stuff in a certain language, and the more I hear certain words come up, the more likely I am to remember those words and actually use them myself when having a conversation. The next one is kind of similar, because again, it's language immersion, but honestly, whatever you love doing, just do that in the language. So if that is watching films or Netflix, like I just mentioned, do that. But if you really love to read novels, go and find novels that were written in that target language originally. I mean, I guess you can also read translations, but I've always just read books that have been written in that language originally, because then also you're learning a bit more about the culture, and also I had to do that at university anyway, so I've just kind of stuck with it, and it's quite nice. It forces you to find new authors, and just yeah, it's nice because you're reading stuff that you wouldn't be able to read, right, if you didn't speak that language, because maybe they haven't translated it into your mother tongue. So I just recommend that. Personally, I'm really bad at reading, and language learning has been something that's forced me to read and discover new authors and discover what type of books I like, because there was a whole few years where I just didn't read a single book. But I do find, I don't know why, I just read in the summer and the spring and not the winter when it's because if I come home from work and it's dark outside and I start to read a book, I'm just going to fall asleep. But I know that as it gets warmer, and when I can go sit in a park and read, or I can sit outside in my garden and read, I know that this is something I'm going to be using. And you can always underline new words you see in the book as you go along as well. And maybe, you know, after you've read a chapter each day, you can look those words up and make a note of what they are. And again, if some of those words are key to the storyline of the novel, they're going to keep popping up, right? So again, Sorry, my memory card was full. But as I was saying, again, the more you see those words, the more you're going to remember them, and be likely to use those words. I mean, it depends what the word is, how likely you are to use it in a conversation, but the more likely you are to remember those words at least, and at least recognise them when you see them or hear them again. And my next tip is actually to follow content creators in your target language, whether that be on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform you use, and as many as you use as possible, because that way sometimes you might end up unintentionally practicing a language, studying a language, right? Because if you say follow some content creators on Instagram, and in the evening after work when you're just tired or whatever time you go on Instagram and you're just going through Instagram stories, and then one pops up from this content creator you like who makes content in Spanish, you're just getting that extra exposure and to the language, and it's an easy way just to get a little extra tiny bit of language practice in, because it's when you haven't planned to study a language, right, and you're just going through Instagram or you're going through TikTok. And obviously you can find content creators who teach you languages as well, and I feel like TikTok and Instagram Reels are quite good for that, because they're just little short things where you can learn certain phrases that could be useful, or idioms, or they might say, sometimes you see these ones, I've seen quite a few of these ones where they say, stop saying this in French, say it like this instead, or whatever. And then you can save them for later, you've got them there. That's just something that I really recommend. Yeah, and it doesn't have to necessarily be content creators who are teaching you the language. I think it's good to follow some of those, but it's also maybe good to have a mixture and follow some who aren't, making content for language learners, but are just making content for people who actually speak that language. Just to see, how the language is used, and to test your listening comprehension and reading comprehension. And my last tip is, if you can, book some sort of lesson. It doesn't need to necessarily be a language course where you go every week at a set time. There are lots of platforms online where you can book tutors for the times that suit you and as little as often, such as italki, which is the one I used to teach English on a few years ago. And the reason I'm recommending this is because if you book a lesson, I feel like you are more likely to actually stick to that schedule and show up for that lesson, right? Because you've paid for that lesson, for one, so you're going to want to go for it because you've paid for it. But two, you're not going to want to let someone down. You don't want to let the teacher down, unless, of course, sometimes you might have to, we all have things that unexpectedly happen and our plans have to change. However, I think if you book a lesson, you're more likely to actually do work. And this is something that I don't do all the time, because currently I'm more focusing on languages that I studied at university, and like this month I'm focusing a lot on French. And I don't really like the idea of spending more money on lessons when I already spent so much money on studying it, because if you don't know, it costs like £9,000 per year to study at university in the UK, and then we have to get a loan and we have to pay it back. So knowing that I've paid all that money, it does annoy me sometimes to then be like, oh, I'm just gonna pay for a lesson. Whereas if it's a new language, I'm more likely to pay. Like for Italian, I wouldn't mind spending money on lessons, but I do find sometimes it's good now and then just to book one. That you've got that practice, you've got someone you can ask questions, and obviously there's all different types of lessons you can book. You can literally just book conversation classes, which are the ones that I go for, just so I know that I can practice my speaking. It's good for my confidence, and can just ask someone questions. If I have any specific questions, I will try and sometimes make a note before going in these lessons if there's anything that I want to ask, anything that I've realised that I'm not too sure how to say, or any like grammatical stuff that I've come across, I'm like, oh, I'm not too sure, like anything like that. They're just handy. Okay, book lessons. And I'm saying this to myself as well, I need to go book some more lessons. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. As I said, I'm not an expert, I'm just learning along the way and sharing my tips and advice, so you know, feel free to also share your own advice in the comments, because not only might it help myself out, but it can also help out other people who are reading through the comment section. So you know, if you do have any tips or whatever you want to share, feel free. And yeah, if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up and click that big red subscribe button down below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye.